All right. Welcome to Dasmo and Hunt. I'm Jean-Pierre Ruth for Information Week. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the conversation, the topic of who should lead the AI conversation in the C-suite. And many organizations might start putting plans together, might have ideas, but how should they really kind of go about that when leadership is got a lot of interesting things that they might want to do, but might not exactly know where they should really start. AI is the technology du jour, probably even more so than just of the moment, but there are a lot of questions out there. So for today's conversation, we have brought together Adam Caplan, President of Digital Business and AI with Altimetrik, Bradon Rogers, Chief Customer Officer with Island, Max Chan, CIO with Avnet, Dr. Ben Waber, MIT visiting scientist, and Cliff Jurkiewicz. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Awesome, great. Vice President of Global Strategy for Phenom. Gentlemen, all of you, thank you so much for making yourselves available today.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Okay, great. All right, awesome. Well, Adam, let's start off with you. How does a C-suite leadership tend to regard AI? Is this just another technology to add to the toolbox, or is this something to kind of like focus all their resources on right now?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly depends on the maturity of the organization and where they're at from an AI standpoint. But I would say that at this point, most people believe, okay, this is not just a hype cycle. This is real. We're a technology consulting firm that builds AI solutions for clients. So if they're working with us, they're pretty far down that maturity curve. So it's a question of, where we see it being with a real focus and real success. It's like not just within the CIO organization, like an experimentation thing happening and some hackathons. It's truly at a broader level where some clients are like, hey, help us, figure out which use cases could be most valuable for us. Where's the ROI? Is it customer support? Is it employee efficiency? Is it AI that interacts with end customers directly, or is it just internal efficiency's sake? Some companies are way beyond that, are like, hey, we're building stuff. We're having challenges with data or getting the AI to get the same answer every time. Just help us build. We need hands-on keyboards. We don't need strategy decks. We don't need white papers. So that level of maturity is different, but certainly we're seeing clients are in a serious fashion, and it's not just a hype cycle and some toying around.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for your insights on that. All right, Ben, what are some key considerations that the C-suite should weigh when exploring how to leverage a new technology, whether it's AI or any number of the other things that might pop into people's landscape?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think especially because now AI means all things to all people. It probably does, behoove us to think more generally about technology, and I think. When you look at, technology adoption in organizations more broadly, it's important to start from, first of all, like what are the actual large problems you have in your organization, and then what, classes of technology could possibly help. And, rather than saying, hey, we've got some technology, let's jam it in, beyond that, I think thinking in terms of systems and processes rather than focusing on what, whether it's, vendors or even in academic papers, people will report out about the, let's say, task-based improvement from adopting some tool, right? Saying, oh, we're going to, improve productivity by 50% on, name a task, completing customer calls. The question isn't, what does it do to that task? I mean, that does, of course, matter. You want to be able to validate those numbers. But it's really, what does that do to the organization as a whole? Like, if that actually worked, how does that require you to change processes for the organization in terms of either how you pay people, how you evaluate people, all those other things? And if you leave that, toward until after you've adopted the technology, you're probably going to have a lot of very big problems that are likely going to probably negate or even make you even less productive than you were before. And this has happened traditionally through the history of technology for, since the Industrial Revolution. So I don't think there's anything fundamentally new here that would lead me to think that, AI is, or any class of AI is different from that respect.
Gotcha. Cool. Great. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Bradon, should managers who are not part of the C-suite themselves be part of the overall conversation to kind of keep the organizations from heading down potentially the wrong path? As the C-suite leaders are ready to kind of like pop off, do their own thing?
Well, yeah, I do certainly think there's other parts of the organization that are not only deciding the models we use and the technologies we adopt to give us the efficiencies. Those are certainly important voices, but there's also guardrails we have to put around these things in our environment. One common one I'm seeing all the time right now is this tug of war between the cybersecurity teams who are petrified about the organizational data finding its way into places that it shouldn't find its way into. You've seen stories of this actually over the past year and a half. Many orgs have been chasing AI-based technologies, derivative technologies from the back end for quite a long time, many years. It's just this point in time. What was it, February of last year, I guess, maybe not of 2024, 2023 or so, when that ballpark time frame when ChatGPT exploded onto the scene and it made AI seem accessible for everybody. It was one of those rare technological situations where right out of the gate, everybody understood the front end of it because you could talk. All you had to know how to speak was your local language, and it could speak back to you in that way. But there's a lot of people that will play a role in this, and I think certainly cybersecurity is a big part of that. Is the natural draw for the end user to want to engage these models to make themselves more predictable. First of all, there's curiosity, but it's easily accessible, and then they find cheat codes for doing their job, and then you saw things where organization data spills into places it shouldn't spill into. So orgs are trying to put guardrails. And I wouldn't say put the genie back in the bottle, but they're trying to find ways to govern it. And to be candid, is probably one of those rare ones where the end users is like a gold rush, where the end users made a mad dash toward the technologies in a wide variety of ways. But not only the end users, the app providers as well. If you're an app provider, you're building a SaaS platform or you're building a technology platform, it's incumbent upon you from a competitive advantage to build those capabilities into your product. So not only is it the stuff that's on the surface, like the chat GPTs of the world and the Groks and things like that are user accessible, but it's even the apps now with it built in. Your Google search now has a natural AI built into it. So cybersecurity teams are certainly quite concerned about that. And I think it's a big part of the equation to make decisions about what's acceptable risk and what's not around the models we adopt.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you for that. I'm sure we'll definitely need to, hit on the cybersecurity aspect of this even more as we, speak further on this. Cliff, if AI is seen as means of increasing efficiency, who in the C-suite holds real responsibility for kind of overseeing efficiency?
Yeah, so this is such an easy answer, and it's everyone. There's no one person in the C-suite that can take charge of this, and ultimately, obviously the CEO is ultimately going to be responsible for the performance of the company, but every one of those leaders needs to look at their organization all the way down to the individual level to understand what efficiency is and how do you define it. And it really starts with really understanding the work that each employee is doing every single day. And I'll give you an easy way to assess this. And it's something that we do. And Phenom is an intelligent talent experience platform. We're working, in the SaaS space and AI based system that helps recruiters and hiring managers and employees and candidates all get connected to help find meaningful work. And what's important about that, if you look at, say, the recruiter as a role, there are basically 100 different capabilities that could be used by a recruiter, an employee, a candidate, a manager in that talent ecosystem. So these technologies that connect the experiences together, about half of them can be replaced by artificial intelligence, and replaced at a degree at which the quality of work and the efficiency and the output are so much greater than any human could actually do. But the real question is on efficiency isn't what can I replace in my worker's day. It's also what do I do with the time that I'm going to give back to that person? Because the other 50% of things that can't be done by artificial intelligence, like critical thinking and strategy and human-based communication, literally talking to other people, God forbid we actually do that anymore. Those things are going to become the real differentiators inside organizations. The organizations that do those things well: strategy, communication, critical thinking, really good analysis, and obviously you're going to use some of these tools to help do analysis, but delivering on experience. All of these things are being managed by human beings. You're not just going to hand it over to just a single technology or a group of technologies. So it's not only knowing where the efficiency can be gained, but it's also knowing what you can do with that time saved. And there's essentially, I think, two choices. And I hate to be very binary about it, and there's a lot of gray area in there between, but it is, I'm going to reduce my workforce, or I'm going to put my workforce, to work doing some really strategic, great things that are going to help grow and scale my company. I would love it, not to do your job, JP, but I would love it, because I know Ben, and I would love it if Ben talked about what that means to organizations, because I think this goes hand in hand with understanding efficiency, but also understanding what it means in terms of the growth and scalability of a company. And I would just love to hear Ben's thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to jump in as long as I get the okay from JP. Excellent. So, I mean, I guess one of my concerns in general is that a lot of times organizations and also just, a lot of people creating different classes of technologies, there's a lot of plausible automation, I think, going on, where in the short term, it's hard to evaluate whether you're actually going to get a medium or long-term, efficiency from adopting a technology, right? Or, if you could change, work processes to dramatically increase the performance of the whole organization, and maybe use, different, algorithmic tools in a way that maybe isn't the easiest one to think of, but actually is going to lead to much bigger returns over the medium to long term. And I guess I think that it's, it is something where it has to involve the whole organization, but it also does need, parts of the organization where you have experts who actually know what these things can do. And I think, Adam, I think it was you who said it. I do think we're very much at a high on the hype cycle right now. We could argue about this for I can't remember if you were, anyway, it's fine. And I think reasonable people can disagree on this, but I do think it's a problem that, and Bradon, you brought this up as well, like the fact that we've built, large language models that reply in natural text, right? Like that's a choice. Right, it's a choice to do that. And Cliff, like you were saying, it's a choice what we apply these algorithms to, right? And we could design them in different ways and optimize for different things that lead to different outcomes. And I think right now, people have a very bad mental model of what these algorithms actually do and what they are. And I think that we as, I'm from a computer science background, and I think a lot of this falls on my field, but we've done a really bad job at designing interfaces on these things. I mean, one of the most annoying things to me is like, we banished command lines as an interface 30 years ago because they're really bad interfaces. Now we've brought them back, but also they're stochastic, which is like not good, right? And we could do so many other things, right? And so I think the challenge is, right, to have people who know, like, as an organization, here's where like the real value is, and let's try to reorganize the company around this. But then also have people that are actually interrogating these different tools to tell you, like, does it actually do this thing? And I think that there's a lot. I still think there's a lot of hype around it. Not that the tools can't do really cool things and aren't going to be very powerful. I think, yeah. Anyway, so I'll stop talking. But that's maybe my take on it.
Gotcha. We'll definitely circle back to that, and appreciate your thoughts, your additional thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So Max, all right, let's talk about the putting the money towards the technology. Investing in new technology almost always comes with new costs to bring it to bear. Should CFOs or other financial leadership within the C-suite kind of really set the tone on how much a company invests in AI before they start making all these Yellow Brick Road plans for what they're going to do, and it's like, well, that's going to cost you to get to there.
JP, that's definitely a great question, but it's interesting that people are actually thinking that an AI investment should be treated any way different from any other investment, any other business investment that a company is making. The CFO is always involved in helping us, ensuring that we put good money in the right investments so that we get the right return. Here at Avnet, what we do is that we make it very simple. Any investment that we do, whether it's technology or business investment or anything at all, it has to meet one of the three criteria or one or more of the three criteria. Is it helping with our top line? Is it driving improvement in our bottom line? Or is it generating improvement in working capital or cash, right? So we have been following that model for as far as I can remember. I've been with the company for 12 years, and that has served us very, very well, because we always go back to ensuring that one or more of those 3 metrics are actually being met, and we can actually take that and invest in other new things. AI is quite interesting, and I really love what Cliff and Ben were talking about, AI being all play. Now, when we talk about AI, a lot of us start thinking about AI from the last 2 years, which is the introduction of generative AI. That's not new. I mean, we have been doing AI for the longest time, starting with data analytics, predictive analytics, forecasting, robotics, automations, etc. And here we are 2 years ago when generative AI brought AI to the mainstream. Right, everyone's saying that, hey, let's go jump into this. It's actually not the case. Well, it's great when some of the lead developers went in, dabbling with it, learning how AI or generative AI is actually helping addressing specific use case. But I think for us, that learning cycle has come behind us now, and we are actually taking it in mainstream, looking at it. But back to the investment piece, right? When we start playing with it, me as the CIO, I have, well, I don't want to call it slush fund, but I have innovations funds that I can put aside to get people to learn and understand how this is going to be able to help the company. But as soon as that is over, right, we then can put business cases on certain areas that we want to address. And I love what Cliff and Ben were saying earlier. Essentially, generative AI and AI for us now becomes an all play. And we are no longer looking at how it's actually addressing a particular role or a particular process, but looking at how it can transform the way that we do business, in the way that we are interacting or transacting with our customer, in the way that we're serving our employees, and the community overall, right? So we would take entire core processes, look at how, if we actually re-engineer and remap it with a clean slate, with a AI first mentality, what does that look like, right? And it goes back to addressing the problem of what do we do with amount of time saved, right? That question goes away for us, because when you look at it end to end, we essentially look at, all right, we used to need 300 people to do this particular, or to run this particular business. Now we can cut it down to 100. The rest of the people or resources that we have, we can invest in other things like R&D or whatever it is, which again, AI play a big role. And with that, taking it to the CFO, addressing that 3 criteria that we have, and then go from there. So yeah, CFO plays a key role, or the finance leadership team plays a key role. But I think AI needs to be looked at it as how it really becomes the new way of doing business, as opposed to this new toys that we are implementing for the company.
Hey, JP, just one thing that Max just noted, this predictive plus generative, we're seeing a lot of excitement in sort of mixing the two together. To Max's point, it's not just, AI has been around a long time, right? Where we're seeing it's really across industry, whether it's pharmaceutical clients we're working with that want to understand forecasting for a supply chain, or whether it's retail company, clothing companies trying to optimize how much billing should I send to, digital versus through our channel partners. We hear all the time, the line from our clients is, we want insights, not dashboards. So taking all this data that might be predicted, might be forecasted, but the layering on generative on top of it, and actually saying, okay, don't just look at the dashboard. This also gets to Ben's sort of UX questions too, is the UX really the right thing here? But deliver insights. That's what we want across industry, not just a static dashboard. We're also seeing some really interesting sort of multimodal use cases, whether in the call center with voice, or even with it's not OCR, it's leveraging the new LLM technologies, but with the new models, it's pretty amazing what you can do to understand documents and be able to take learnings from them and derive those insights. So I think there's some interesting things in multimodal world, as well as sort of this insights layered on top of predictive.
You know, hitting some themes in there. You know, Max brought something forth a minute ago that I think is interesting, because many of these things have been happening for years. They've been happening quietly behind the scenes in many cases, many times buried in our orgs, and our engineers are smart folks. They've been chasing these things for ages. It's interesting, and I'm sure Max's position as a CIO right now, he sees this. It's the change in behavior from the others in various parts of the org, because now it's the inbound that you're getting from people otherwise that had no interest in AI before. It's the heads of HR. It's the head of a facility somewhere trying to figure out how to optimize the work. They hear this, they see it, and they've experienced it now because they've got generative AI access. So now I would imagine CIOs everywhere are getting tons of inbound from all kinds of corners of the organization. And I think there's going to give rise to two key things that I think are part of the narrative as a part of this. Various parts of the org are going to have different models that they adopt. You know, you talk about cost. There'll be a space around orchestration of models, where you have an orchestration layer that creates arbitrage around the various models that get used. But on top of that, a change on how we build applications and resources, where the effect of the business logic layers, because I think this is where Adam was going a little bit, the marriage of the generative AI to much of what we do on the back end, this middle area where AI agents start affecting our business logic and giving us outcomes that are really, like, let's say you have 100 customers today, and today you build business logic that satisfies all those 100 customers equally with the same business logic. You'll have different logic now that will give tailored outcomes to each of the 100 customers on the other end, where the front end of the generative AI equation feeds them many of these things, sometimes visually, sometimes otherwise, but married to many different types of backends that the AI is handling in the middle layer. Very, very interesting conversation that happened over the past couple of weeks with Satya Nadella around this topic on the Microsoft front. So if you're interested in that topic, that's very interesting. He's raised a bunch of eyebrows in the discussion around how that affects SaaS technologies, for example.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll play off of what both Max and Adam and Ben were talking about as well, just in terms of, how do you even determine what kind of technology you want to bring in? And obviously, you're thinking about AI, machine learning agents as well. I mean, you can create your own agent in about 10 minutes. It takes no time at all. The question really is what data is feeding that model? And that's where I would say, a lot of the clients that we're working with are really interested in the data set that we're using inside of our artificial intelligence, and showing the differentiation, in that data. Like, we're going to bring an intelligence layer that they don't have. But what's really important is, can that intelligence layer that you're bringing from the third party integrate with what you already have? Because you've got this internal corporate IP, enterprise level IP, that however old your company is, it could be a year, it could be 100 years, that you've amassed over that period of time. That's going to be important to understanding how that particular model applies to your enterprise. So injectable AI is really the next phase of this. It's going to happen very, very quickly. But and I think it's really, to Ben's point, is the UX layer really that important? I would say that it's probably not. I think what's important is to understand how you're melding these data models together and surfacing that information in a way that's actually going to be intelligent and usable by the end user and the organization, in combination with what they already have. You don't want to replace, and you can't replace, because it's going to be unique to every organization. I think, Brandon, you were kind of leaning into that a little bit. And so I think it's really important that when you look at these technologies, that you're looking at something that can integrate with what you already have, and do what we call a rediscovery. You're rediscovering your own data, combining it with this new layer of intelligence, and you're getting something you've never had before, an insight that's actionable, understood, and actionable immediately.
Yeah, and to that point, right, Cliff, the many experimentations and POC that we have done, we're very quick to understand and realize that, hey, it's not just in multi-model situations. It's really a multi-tier orchestrations that is needed, because we take the large language model to help with the interpretations of the queries or whatever that comes in, right? But very quickly goes down to creating our own small language model or domain-specific model for the supply chain specific use case that we have. in order for us to be able to get the most accurate response. Because at the end of the day, if we are opening this up to the customers, we do not want it to give you response that we cannot fulfill, right? Services or product that we cannot fulfill. So that multi-tier orchestration or what you call injectable is really, really key. And that's where we spend the most time in addressing.
Gotcha. Well, these are all really great thoughts, and really appreciate the insight that you all have been giving on that. And definitely want to get to some kind of last questions for all of you to kind of pick up on. Should I combine them into one? How should differences of opinion on AI be resolved within the C-suite? Should there be somebody who's like kind of the deferred voice to maybe arbitrate the back and forth, or is it just a matter of how the C-suite is already organized? And with that, where should C-suite leaders kind of look to, if they need to, really increase their understanding of pros and cons with AI, or at least maybe the pros and cons of what they're trying to implement with AI? It's open for all of you, please.
I think it's really important to move fast right now and build a muscle and learn how to leverage these new technologies. So if there's a blocker in the C-suite, I think that's a huge problem. And take, for example, just risk mitigation, security, which is of utmost paramount importance. But also, you don't want to just slow things down for that purpose. You got to move fast. So that's where we often see, whether it's a governance board or whether it's a CEO or whether it's a more forward-leaning, CTO or CIO, it's okay. How do you lower risk while still building the muscle and still empowering your employees? And someone mentioned before, legal and HR and these other organizations. What we find is, they get their hands on these tools and they can start doing amazing things and building their own custom GPTs, and suddenly they're building efficiency and you're like, wow, and sharing stories. So some ways to mitigate risk are, right, just leverage these tools for internal efficiency. Don't expose it to your customers. Or even, I love what Cliff was saying about take the corpus of data you have that no one can get access to. We don't need to go to the internet, leverage third-party data. Just take the data you already have that's secure internally and enable people to benefit from that. So I think there's risk mitigation strategies that, as long as you're using the right, the enterprise versions of these tools, whether it's enterprise versions of ChatGPT or the where your data is not going to training the models, or you can start leaning in and start learning, and not having someone who's trying to block and just slowing the organization down.
There's definitely, if you think about the volumetric issues with this, your end users outweigh your developers by a factor of tens of thousands to one in some cases in many orgs, or thousands to one. The reality is that the risk side of the house, for the most part, I'm not saying it's in all cases, certainly we have issues with that back end, and we've got to have those controls, but the natural inclination of the end users today is the biggest front end draw that many CIOs, CISOs, and others are concerned about, because it's the end user who's going to take my data out of this application over here and go throw it over here to try to make their job easier, not considering what they've just done, what the risks were associated with that. There are technologies, there's plenty of technology from a cyber standpoint that can create boundaries around these things for the end users. Let the end users use them. And that's one of the challenges with cyber in general, and cyber's working to overcome this for the past many years, is this whole sledgehammer approach of saying no to everything. Because when you say no, the end users are inclined to go try to find their own avenue for it, instead of finding easy ways to let them leverage and take advantage of it from a personal nature as they need to affect their jobs. At the same time, there are ways to create boundaries where the organizational data doesn't have to spill to the places you don't want it to spill to, while still letting the user have the freedom to use these technologies and scratching that itch. We saw that in the adoption years ago. Think about shadow IT, where people would start using personal Dropbox and personal G drives and things like that. Well, they did that in advance of the org actually having its own cloud storage. And then when the org gained its own cloud storage and gave them options, people stopped using those types of things and went to the organizational standard, because it was easier to use the org standard than it was to do something personal. In much the same way, we have to empower the individuals in the org to have access to these things, make it accessible, make it safe in the process. And there's many technologies for that today.
Yeah, that Brandon, you reminded me of something. About a decade ago, I was running a project with one of the largest banks in the world around social media and communication, and they had banned the use of Facebook in the organization. And we quickly discovered at least 26 different employee-based user groups on Facebook. And
Yeah.
these were private groups, but they were employees exchanging ideas, how to find information, how to share knowledge. And once we pointed that out, we sort of we then brought that in and said, people are doing this anyway. The real question is, do you want to be a part of the conversation or not? Because the conversation is going to happen with or without you. This is the same thing with this technology. And I would say, you especially in the C-suite, you don't need agreement. You need alignment. And each person, each leader in their organization should be aligning with what the priorities of the organization are, the growth and scalability goals, new product, new service, new markets, whatever it might be. If you have alignment on what the goals are, then you can align the technologies to help create, a path, to those goals. And so that's a really important, I don't care if someone agrees with me or not, but are we aligned that that's the goal of the company? That's the goal of my department. Then I'm going to go and do it. And I also agree very much so with what Adam said. If you're not doing this right now, your runway is exponentially shorter day by day to catch up with your competition who is doing this. So experimentation is very important. Max, I think you talked a little bit about, you have multiple proofs of concept running at the same time. That's the way to do it. You can control it, a lot better. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do. I would make one recommendation, and that is, and I think maybe JP, you mentioned it around governance. I would be creating a governance board. It's a recommendation I give to every one of my clients. Create a governance board. That governance board should be staffed not just by your internal folks, it should also be staffed with your vendors who are providing these technologies to you, because they're going to come in with ideas that you have no idea what's happening, in the marketplace. Because this is what, for some of us on this call, we're creating these technologies and we know what the runway looks like and where it's going. And we can bring that into the conversation. So you take that into account and then do with it what you will. But a governance board specifically around these technologies is a great place to start the conversation in your organization and to really hit the ground running quickly.
Yeah, I think as far as you're concerned, right, governance is very important, just like what Cliff and everyone else was saying earlier. Having that governance, although ultimately it falls onto me and the CEO, if there is really a conflict to be resolved. We haven't actually gotten to that situations yet. But the important thing for us is really the mantra that we've been following, right? For any technology investment or venture that we are going through, we say that it has to be business-led. So the governance organization is really a business-led governance as opposed to a C-suite or a technology group-led governance setup. And from a technology platform perspective, we started this a few years ago with this whole digital delivery model. We make it very easy for people to be able to adopt a federated delivery model. What that means, and we're doing it for AI type solutions as well. What it really means is that while we govern and my team really drives together with you call it Agile Squad or pods or whatever name that you give it, right? To focus on the enterprise priorities, and there's like 2 or 3 of them only that we would drive. Everyone else will be able to, within that guardrail, within the same platform, within the security and controls that we have, able to go and work on their own priorities as well, as long as it doesn't take away from the enterprise priorities that we have, right? So that model has served us well in the digital era, and now is actually showing dividends in the AI aspect as well. If they want a new tool, they want new capability, Bradon, as you mentioned, right? They have to go through my team and the security team to make sure that that is really meeting the expectations of the organizations. But then again, since we have that all laid out for them, they usually don't have to go, to your point about social media, right? They don't have to go out and get new tools. They essentially use the platform that has the models and capabilities that offers.
Great. All right. Awesome. All right. Well, listen, gentlemen, that was the final question for you all, and I really appreciate all of your thoughts for this conversation. Cliff, Ben, Max, Bradon, Adam, you've been fantastic. Appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having
Thanks
us.
so much, JP. Thanks, everybody.
To listen to the entire conversation, look for the DOS1 Hunt podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, and other popular podcast platforms.